Very cool. So Vanessa, I don't know how long I've known Vanessa, like 15 years, something like that, 15 years. So John and I first met Vanessa when we were coming here. Actually, so her dad and I did a thing at Oxford many years ago, and I met him, and her dad is a great dude. Oxford, you'll find this surprising, Oxford is a very staid place. So, I can tell you other stories, but the story that's okay to share on video is that we were doing this thing, presenting all these different scientific results about stuff in this big famous old presentation place. Her dad was talking about Hurricane Katrina. Her dad is Ivor Van Heerden, if you guys remember some of those stories.
He wrote a book about Katrina.
Yeah, but sort of speaking truth to power. We can talk about that after. We were talking about Vanessa now, but anyway, so I met him, and then it's several days in Oxford, which sounds super cool, right? Old center of learning, one of the oldest universities in the world, and all that kind of great stuff. And so we're like, great, let's go out and do stuff at night. Oh my God, the most boring town on the planet. I've never been to a more boring town. So we'd go out, and several times her father and I got kicked out of pubs by people saying, "You blokes are too loud and you're swearing." The first time it happened, like, that was weird.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
Vanessa, is your dad very loud?
Not at all. Not even. Extremely loud.
Really? Is he loud? Wow.
Especially after.
So, anyway, I just say
So
we
wasn't
became
just
fast
you.
friends. We became fast friends. Nobody else was hanging out with us. We were the ones that were hanging out. So anyway, so then afterwards, I said, wow, we bring students to New Orleans. We should visit with you. And so for many years, when her dad was still in Louisiana, would come and speak to our class, so very generously. And one of those trips, we met Vanessa. And then after the Deepwater Horizon, I believe is what it was, we did a symposium on campus. So we invited various folks, including your dad, to come and speak and talk to us about what was going on with the Gulf Coast, sustainability, oil spills, hurricanes, all that kind of stuff. And so Vanessa came, and she's like, well, this is an interesting campus. And so then we foolishly tricked her to come be a student at our campus. So then she came. So it was awesome. So Vanessa totally knows our program. She's been where you all have been. She was our first writing tutor. So we got some money to help students with writing in 100 and other things. She was that. She was a TA for GIS. She did all kinds of stuff. In addition to our experience here, she also came with us on our trip, which John came along with us. It was a co-instructor to the Cook Islands. So she did her capstone on essentially data from the equivalent of this trip, but that was in the South Pacific, looking at reef health and visualizing stuff. So she did that, looking at like how healthy are the reefs, and let's have some cool visualizations geospatially showing that in a static environment. And she really liked it. And then she got married. And then the lovely couple came back to Baton Rouge. Came back to so they came back, gets in a PhD program at LSU, and I'll say it because she's not talking. Is like super awesome, kick butt, no surprise, and sort of has become indispensable, I would argue, to several different efforts on campus because. Even though we think that all of we professors are great with statistics, or great with GIS, or great with whatever, not all of us are. And so she became someone that kind of could help people out in different contexts, in different settings. And I don't want to speak, but I think that's sort of what also helped focus some of the PhD stuff. So, so with that, this is the last time I'll probably introduce her as not Dr. Van Heerden.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, so I'm Vanessa. I graduated from CI in 2017, and I got an ESRM degree and a biology degree. The ESRM degree was much more beneficial, so good job for picking that one. Let's see, he's right, I got married, and then decided to come back to Louisiana. My parents are here. My husband's whole family is here, so we decided to come back and save some money. And then I got a job at the dean's office in the college that I'm currently at, doing an actual interactive story map for the entire college, which is basically, I interviewed every single faculty member and every single graduate student, and I mapped where their research is so that we can show how that college's international research is impacting the world. So from that, I wasn't planning on getting my PhD at LSU, but I was interviewing one of the faculty members, and within 30 minutes of our conversation, he agreed to be my PhD advisor and was like, let's do it. And so then I decided to get my PhD at LSU. And from that, I've done a lot of things. So are any of you planning to go to graduate school? I know it's kind of hard to think about. Yeah, graduate school? Okay. So the interesting thing about graduate school is that you should get paid to go to graduate school. You should not pay anything. So typically what you do is half your time, you do your research, the other half of your time, you're paid to do something else. And there are 3 ways. So 1, you can be a teaching assistant, which is that you help faculty with their classes. 2, you could be an RA, which is a research assistant, which is basically you help your advisor do research. Typically that's grant funded. And then the other way is to find another type of job on campus. I was wonky, and I'm going to suggest that you don't be wonky unless you have a different career path than what normal people want. And that I came in and started my PhD with a project that was not funded. So I came in, told my advisor, this is what I wanted to do. He was like, cool, I don't have any funding for that. I was like, that's fine, I'm gonna find my own. So I was a teaching assistant for our department. I was a science communicator for our department. I helped bring fundraise for our college. So I had to talk to donors that had millions and millions of dollars, and I had to get them to give it to us. I was an instructor of record, so that's basically like the same thing as a lecturer at CI. And then now I run a program. It's called Environment Tours. It is a weekly after-school high school science research program. And what we do is that every week after school, we bring 15 underrepresented students from high schools around LSU to LSU. They get partnered up with an undergraduate and a graduate student who mentors them on a science project of whatever they're interested in. So right now we have done projects looking at diatoms, potentially using biofuel production. We have a project going right now that's about antibiotic resistance with school buses. So we have all kinds of cool stuff. So that being said, that's just part of what I do. The other part is my research, which I took my love of science communication and my love of GIS, and I became a geospatial ecologist. And what that does and what that means is that I study how people and nature are related across time and space. So I did that in the Cook Islands. I did an interactive map of reef health and how that related to the people that live there and how they use the reef. And now in my dissertation, I am studying how we use science communication by do y'all know the CPRA, Coastal Restoration Protection Authority? Have y'all talked about that?
Some do, some don't.
Okay. So actually, somebody else can hold my map. I'll talk about it. And then okay. So basically, so how much do y'all know about what the coastal restoration and land loss and stuff like that that's happening in Louisiana? A decent amount? Something give me a topic that you know about.
The levees
What about them?
blocking sediment.
Okay. Do you know about how they're planning to fix that with coastal restoration?
Diversion.
Yeah, the sediment diversions. Yeah. Okay. So there's 2 ways that we are protecting, 2 main ways that they're trying to protect Louisiana. The first is freshwater diversions, and the second is sediment diversions. Does anybody know the difference between those 2?
So is it sediment diversion out of the Mississippi River and freshwater?
Yeah, no, you're good. Okay, so basically they're almost the exact same thing, except so a diversion is basically you cut into the river, you jam some concrete in the ground, almost like you cut the levee basically, and you open it, and you have a gate that blocks it. And all the differences between a freshwater diversion and a sediment diversion is where you cut, basically how high you're cutting. So in a freshwater diversion, you want to cut into the river only where fresh water comes through, no sediment. The sediment brings turbidity, which can smother all of our commercial fisheries, like oysters and crawfish and all that kind of stuff. With a sediment diversion, you cut lower, so you don't want the fresh water to come through, you just want the sediment to come through, and that way you build land. That is the thought. So literally it's the exact same process, it's just where you cut within the river. So yes, the sediment diversion. So right now, we actually, a month ago, got the budget approved to run the sediment diversion into this bay called Barataria Bay. So we're up here and Barataria Bay is down here. So the sediment diversion is going to go right here. We also have 2 diversions going into the Breton Sound. Can y'all see that? Going into Breton that are proposed. And then we have another one that's coming off of the Atchafalaya River into Terrebonne. So there's 5 main ones proposed. Only one is officially under construction, which is Mid-Barataria. And so what I am doing is trying to figure out if the people that are going to be affected by that sediment diversion are being communicated to properly about what's going to happen. So the Coastal Restoration and Protection Authority, CPRA, are basically the ones that are running all the coastal restoration in Louisiana. So our state has the largest coastal restoration plan in all of the United States. It's 50 years, $50 billion. And the Mid-Barataria is like a $2 billion project. So out of that $50 billion. And so one of the things that they use in their plans of how they're protecting Louisiana is something called the Ecosystem Services Framework. Who could tell me what that is?
Ecosystem services, somebody. Don't leave me hanging.
I'm guessing they frame how we service our ecosystems.
Sure, yeah, that sounds it. So basically, there's 2 things. So you have ecosystem services as the concept. So does anybody know of an ecosystem service?
Flood protection.
Yeah, flood protection, air, yeah. Water quality, so getting fresh water, pollinators, all that kind of stuff. So it's basically ecosystem services as a whole is what nature provides to people for our well-being. That's what it is. And the way that we use this framework is that we actually can quantify those services and put them as dollar values. So we can say an acre of wetlands in Louisiana is worth $100 every year, kind of thing. And that is what's used to try and get people to care, because obviously everybody cares about money. So that's something that the CPRA is using to communicate the value of why we should protect coastal Louisiana. And so for my dissertation, I am trying to determine if that concept and that framework, that actually putting a dollar value on wetlands is actually beneficial to making people care. And so what I have found is that it's not the dollar value. So people don't actually care that you can protect a $200 billion commercial fishing industry. They don't care. What they care about is that they get to go outside and fish. That's what they want to protect. So the way that we communicate and the way that these coastal restoration people are communicating why we should do this is actually the opposite of what we should be doing. And this is something that they're actually coming up. So CPRA creates what's called a coastal master plan every 5 years. In 2023, they're doing their next one. And so the research that I'm doing right now is actually going into how they're going to write that 2023 plan, because there's such a huge disconnect between especially the sediment diversions, because people are literally, the way that they're communicating it, they're not, even in the EIS statements and all that, they are not talking about how the people who's going to have sediment coming into their backyards are going to be impacted. And so what we're trying to do is figure out how you tell those people what's happening so that they don't raise a hissy fit and get upset about it, because the importance of, and especially, I mean, the same thing in California, we use nature, right? There is a utilitarian value to nature, and it's really important for us to see how our use of it is going to impact the future generations' use of it. And the best way to understand that is to be able to communicate it. So that's pretty much my spiel. Does anybody have any questions?
Wow! Wow! So I have, oh sorry, some students have questions.
What's an example of how maybe future generations aren't able to utilize a certain ecosystem service because of our actions?
So even just like levying the Mississippi River, you cut off the ability for us to use and get these fisheries out of there. So there's so many people that live and rely on coastal Louisiana that are not even being considered. So there's actually the first climate change migrators, federally funded climate change migrators, are on the Earthquake Delta. They're called the Alumni Charles. They're a Native American community, and they have received, under the Obama administration, $74 million to move, to be kindly migrated. They have not yet received that money. That was over 10 years ago. So they are still there. And what they are seeing is that literally their homes are underwater. They can't live there anymore. The community is down to like 50 people. It was about 600. And they just can't afford to leave because you have this issue. And this is where the political side of it comes in, or the sociological side of it, is that people that live in coastal Louisiana make less than $20,000 a year. And then we have flood insurance rates. Louisiana has like the highest flood insurance rate ever. So even if your home is in a flood zone, I don't know if any of you guys own homes or know about flood insurance, but basically if your home is in a flood zone, you are required to buy flood insurance. And in my house, and I don't even live in a flood zone, my flood insurance for me to get it is $1,200 a year. And I don't live in a flood zone. The people that live in coastal Louisiana that do live in a flood zone are up to like $7,000, $8,000 a year. Like for some of them, that's half of their yearly pay. So they can't afford to leave because nobody's going to buy their house, because nobody wants to buy a house you have to pay $8,000 just in flood insurance for. So they can't leave. Nobody's paying for them to leave. Nobody's helping them leave. They can't raise their house because companies want to charge them $100,000 to raise it. And so you basically have these sitting ducks that CPRA is like, hey, I'm going to fix all your problems by pummeling sediment into your backyard, and it's going to be fine. You're not going to flood. Don't worry about it. All your stuff's going to be cool. Your fisheries are not going to be impacted. We're going to have all this money, and it's going to be fantastic. And the problem is that when you have people that make so little money that they really can't advocate for themselves in these situations because they don't have the political pull as people in the government do, then they're left with people like me and other graduate students and other scientists that are pushing to be their advocates and be the ones that say, hey, no, you can't just funnel sediment into somebody's backyard and claim that it's for the betterment of the whole state because it's going to bring all this money and we're going to save the coast, without taking into consideration the fact that these people live there. And so that is kind of the main way, is that you're literally seeing people's homes get completely taken out from underneath them. And CPRA is just like, oh my God.
So in your survey work, geographically, where are you doing that work? Along coastal Louisiana in general? Is it in a certain parish? Or is it
Yeah, so the cool part about, Louisiana has what we call a jurisdictional coastal zone. And they recently, within the last like 5 years, increased the northern extent of that coastal zone. So almost a third of our state is officially in the coastal zone. We are currently standing in the coastal zone. So my survey, part of my dissertation, I did a large spatial analysis. So I predicted how many ecosystem services we're going to lose over the next 50 years, acre by acre in the coastal zone, and calculated that total sum amount. So basically, if we implement the master plan the way that we plan, what our annual ecosystem service provisioning for the entire state's going to be, and then if we don't, how much more we're going to lose. And then the other part that I did is that I surveyed, we did 620 coastal residents. And so the cool part about surveys is that you just kind of send them out and hope that people answer them to the best of their knowledge. And if you want to pay more money, you can tell them where to get them from. So I did all of the zip codes located in the coastal zone. So there's going to be more people, like when you have a higher population density, more likely you're going to have more survey respondents in that area. But yeah, so right now it's the jurisdictional Louisiana State Coastal Zone, and part of that survey was to determine what's the best way and what makes people value their relationship with nature. So is it the fact that their community economically depends on nature? Do they like to be outside all the time? Do they have important family memories there? What are the factors that we as researchers can use to better communicate what's happening? And so actually a result that I found yesterday is that who people think are in their community is actually a stronger influence on how they value nature. So it's not how much money they get out of the wetlands in Louisiana. It's not the fact that the state needs it. It's not the fact that our economy depends on it. It's the fact that it's who they are, where they live, and who they live with and around and interact with, and how all of that contributes to how they value teaching. So, yeah.
Are you seeing differences? That's great that you're finding that. Are you seeing differences with ecosystem services that people understand compared to ones that they don't understand? So like carbon sequestration, right? A lot of people might hear that and be like, I don't know what that means, put a dollar value on it because I don't understand it, compared to like a fisheries or storm protection or pollination where they do understand what those are?
Yeah, so there are some, I haven't analyzed them entirely yet, so there are some questions that I put in the survey that compared, I gave them the dollar value of the service, so basically said it's worth $10 per acre for carbon sequestration. Or I told them, hey, they take carbon out of the atmosphere, lowers our CO2, and that is something that the wetlands provide us. And I got them to say which one they liked more.
Right.
And my initial, and I did that for all of the services pretty much
cool.
that we include. And my initial looking over the data is saying that it's not the dollar value one. It's literally the fact that it's the concept of what they provide us, not how much money it actually
Cool.
is.
That's great.
Which is interesting because it means that the dollar value thought of like economy rules all doesn't necessarily bank well for coastal restoration. It's very much like the way that you communicate science nowadays, especially like in general for restoration, is you have to take into consideration how people use nature and how they see themselves within nature. And I think that's important for all of you and all of us as researchers to think about when we're doing our research, even if it's not on science communication, if it's not on how we relate to nature. Something as researchers that we have to think about is how we're talking about what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, when you guys graduate and you try to find a job, what's going to help you with all of it is being able to talk about what you do and being able to effectively tell people that what you're doing is important. So that's what I'll say about that.
Vanessa, are there mismatches or conflicts between kind of what local people value and what the near-term changes to those ecosystems, like when that sediment starts being deposited in their backyard? Is there any mismatches between what they want and there might be a broader benefit to Louisiana for that sediment, but is it really benefiting those local people?
Yeah, I think, so I have a whole section of my survey that's specifically targeting like people's reactions to the sediment diversions. And I just haven't looked at it yet. But I think the main thing is that there actually has been papers that have published about like, especially fishermen. The fisherman community in Louisiana is so strong because they all live in coastal Louisiana, and you change. I mean, if you fuck with crawfish season in Louisiana, you are seriously gonna get in trouble. And that's what those sediment diversions are going to do. So they're messing with the crawfish, they're messing with oysters, and all these people. So I don't know. So we have oyster leases in Louisiana. So basically, all the state's bottom water, basically in the brackish part of Louisiana, is bought out by individuals. So you can buy a piece of it, the bottom water, and make it an oyster lease. So you can go to your own little, whatever the things are that they oysters sit on, and you can harvest your own oysters and make your own money doing that. And so what's happening is that those sediment diversions are going straight over these people's oyster leases, and oyster fishermen are mad because they're like, hey, this is my private property because I bought this lease, and you guys are taking your decisions and funneling them into my private property. And so yeah, it's a whole, I think at the end of the day, we have been fighting about sediment diversions since the first master plan came out in 2012, and CPRA has continued to push forward. So the sediment diversions are happening. It's just trying to figure out how best to make sure that the people that live there get the help that they need to make it through that.
So we
It's
want the
also-
sediment oh, sorry.
I would say, it's also, just to be clear though, right, it's going to change the salinity. The oysters are going to move. So it's not, there won't be no oysters anymore. But that individual who might have a lot of money and a lot of political pull, that individual's parcel might not have oysters on it. but it's often sold as you're going to destroy oysters. It's actually going to destroy oysters for that person or that community, but not necessarily oyster recruitment overall. So you're saying
The diversion, sediment diversion, is made to build land, and that, I guess, is seen as a global good.
Yeah.
But local fishermen, oystermen, fishers,
Yeah, Fisher Oystermen, yeah.
they have interests. They conflict with the greater good.
And the other weird thing about the sediment diversions is that when you actually look at how much land area that they plan to build, it's minuscule. So like when I did my spatial analysis, I found that still, even with the master plan, we lose a third of the land in coastal Louisiana, and we're going to lose a third of the ecosystem services that we have currently, which means those oysters, like the recruitment's going to shift, but we don't know how the economy is even going to be benefited by the sediment diversions, because the location of where they're putting them is already the more saltwater and the barrier islands that are diminishing. All of that is just going to increase the tidal energy and the wave energy into those bays, Barataria and Terrebonne and Breton, and all of it is just, there's no way for us to accurately predict the effectiveness of the sediment diversions, and I think that is one of the main things that fishermen are so upset about, is that they can't adequately say, hey, we know for a fact that your property is going to be cool, 1, 2, you're going to have oysters, 3, our economy is going to be benefited, and 4, the land is actually going to sit there, because they're funneling mud and hoping that it sticks. And mud is very, very small, so it takes very little amount of waves to make it move, and so it's not guaranteed that it's going to stay.
Other questions? How about other questions about just things that were valuable about our program that you guys might be interested in? Or maybe I'll ask. So Vanessa, what were some of the specific things that you experienced or learned about or whatever while an ESRM student that have benefited you in grad school?
I can honestly tell you, I deal with, for the job that I run, the Environment Force program, I deal with over 30 graduate students and undergraduate students every single week. I knew more as coming out of my bachelor's degree with ESRM than many of the PhD students that are in our program know.
What? What? Say that again. I love it. There's music to my ears. Say it.
I knew more from our ESRM degree than most PhD students do.
What? You can clap for it.